Hello everyone and welcome to another video with me, 320 Sim Pilot, and today we're going to be taking a look at one of the most extreme topics we'll ever cover on the channel, and that is upset prevention and recovery in the Airbus A320 aircraft. So what are we referring to here? This is when the aircraft gets put into an extreme or unusual attitude or position, i.e. an unintended one, and how we can recognise it and then safely recover from it. It's an important part of airline pilot training. It's not something we discuss very much, but it's something that came up on a stream recently and everyone was very interested and asked for a video on it. So today we're going to cover that, and I've obviously got the test A320 here to take to the skies and try it out. This is going to look at some pretty unusual things. Please don't be alarmed by what you see in the video. This is things that pilots train for, but it's incredibly rare. There have been very few instances of it ever happening in the real world. And of course, this is all for your own use in Flight Simulator at home, not for any real world use, even though I am a real world Airbus A320 pilot. It's just to give you a bit of extra context on your home simulations and to hopefully reassure you about what pilots do with their aircraft and how we are trained to handle these situations. I'm in Microsoft Flight Simulator with the Phoenix Simulations A320 today, but it really won't matter whichever Airbus you're in. If it's a relatively detailed A320 simulation, this video will be applicable to you. Right, let's jump into the video and we're going to discuss the principles behind it, how we're going to set up the aircraft to sort of demonstrate this, and how we would recover from these situations. Right, starting on the flight deck then. So what I want to go through is what situations could lead to an upset recovery and what exactly am I referring to. So there's a good example already, which you can see we're getting shaken around a bit in that outside footage as well. That's Microsoft Flight Simulator's mechanical turbulence, it's called. Turbulence caused by the wind over the ground. Now, it's, I think, a little bit extreme. Even 45 knots off the Alps at 25,000 feet. Yeah, I suppose you might feel it. So you get shaken around a bit. So if you were to hit a particularly bad mountain wave at a lower sort of altitude or near some more extreme mountains around the world, then you could find your aircraft being put into an unusual attitude or position. Now, what do we mean by that? Well, obviously this is a normal attitude, 2.5 degrees, nose up, wings level. This gives us pretty much level flight at around 280 knots, so this is pretty normal. But if our nose was up above 30 degrees, or even above 20 degrees, or something just out of the ordinary, that would be an unusual or upset position to be in. It's not where we want to be, and that's the important thing. It's primarily referring to a situation where the aircraft is not in the position we want it to be. It's where it's diverging from what we intend it to be doing, and that is obviously an unnerving position. Pilots are often known as being slightly obsessed with control, because of course that is our job. We want to have control over this machine and where we put it. That's the principle of flying people around safely, is that we know where we want it and we can recognize when it isn't there and we can get it back there. So if we lose control of that for a moment for any of these reasons, then it's a situation we need to recover from very quickly. So strong mountain waves, ridiculous turbulence, these things could potentially cause a loss of control that puts the aircraft in an unusual position. It has also happened where wake turbulence has done this, usually just smaller aircraft than the 320. A 320 is a large jet transport aircraft in effect. I know it's not as big as others, but it is still pretty big. However, if it goes through the wake of an A380, there is a small chance of an upset situation. But smaller aircraft in particular are more prone to that. Wake turbulence is very, very, very strong and very sudden, and it has the ability to flip over aircraft if they're small and light enough or close enough to a heavy enough aircraft. So that could put the aircraft in all sorts of positions. And upset, it could be all the way to upside down. It really could. The plane is, or the aeroplane is strong enough to handle a lot of different extreme situations, but it's important that we can get it back where we want it safely and quickly. Other things that could do it is just mishandling the aircraft. It has happened where pilots have got it wrong. Maybe the aircraft is initially disrupted by some weather or turbulence or some wake turbulence, and then the pilots accidentally mishandle the aircraft due to a lack of preparation or awareness of what was going on. This is something that has also happened in the past, but thankfully very rare, and that's what this training is aimed to prevent. Control issues as well. Aircraft that have had situations that cause temporary loss of control of some of the main flight control surfaces, or unusual behaviour of them caused by environmental phenomena or ice and things like this. This has all led to upset positions. And in the Airbus, of course, we could also talk about that in the sense of the flight control computers. If there was a problem with one of those, before you could turn it off, it might have upset the aircraft. Classic example being the old one. It's not no longer considered an issue, that they've changed the logic, but if you had a situation where the aircraft thought it was stalling and was lowering the nose, then you would have to turn off some of the computers, or you could override it into alternate law. this is complex. Don't worry if you don't know what I'm talking about. But if you needed to force the aircraft into alternate law, by the time you've done that, it may be in an upset position. It may have put the nose down very far, things like that. It has also happened from people getting things wrong, resetting computers in flight when it's not appropriate, things like that, and then subsequently mishandling the recovery after that position. So the first thing to remember is the stall recovery may well be required. If you are in a stall in an Airbus, it will say stall, stall, and that warning we rely on. So we will apply the stall recovery immediately if we need to. So that is very, very important. I am not going to talk all about stall recovery today. It's a big topic on its own. So we're going to move past that and move into the upset prevention and recovery. But the stall recovery is in effect in an A320, it's all about lowering the nose, reducing the angle of attack on the wings. We don't try and do anything clever. We don't worry about even rolling the wings level initially. We just get the nose down. That's the first action. Get the nose down. By pushing the nose down, you're energizing the air over the wings, and that's the main thing. Good. So, other things to be aware of. In a normal law, remember, if I disconnect the autopilot and turn off the flight directors, so here we go. So we're flying along in Mach, and we got the auto thrust in. If I go full stick all the way over, it's going to stop at that marker, about 67 degrees, and it's going to sit there, and it won't let me go further. It's still full stick across. Likewise, if I put the nose all the way down, it's not going to go past -15 in normal law. It just won't do it. The Airbus is prepared for this. And if I go full back stick up, it will max out at 2.5 G because we're clean. So that's the most stress it will put on the airplane, and the nose will go all the way up to 30 degrees, and then it will stop. And in fact, we'll probably hit alpha protection before then. So let's get the nose down. By the way, see how as I lower the nose, that alpha protection disappears beneath us. As we unload the wing, the airplane is in a much happier position. So that's normal law. So those positions are all well within the realms of what the Airbus can handle on its own. The autopilot can stay within those realms. It will get the nose back to where it needs to be, and even if the autopilot's not in, as you see here, the airplane will protect itself. But there are times where it doesn't matter that you're in normal law. If the wake turbulence or the turbulence is severe enough, then, and again, incredibly rare, it almost never happens. It's more likely to be a function of mishandling or an issue like that. But if it does happen and the aircraft goes outside of those limits, that is still possible. Remember, normal law, it just protects us basically from our input, and it does its best to stay within those realms. But if the external factors force it past it, then it could happen. So you may not be in normal law anymore. I have videos on that on the channel if you're wondering what normal law is. So I'm actually going to turn off 2 of the ADR computers. If you turn off 1 and 3, and then you can put air data switching to Captain 3, and you'll get air data back. Auto thrust will no longer work. So I'm going to set the auto thrust up about where it was. Turn it off. There we go. Master caution. So ADR 1 and 2, 4, that's fine. We're in alternate law now. Protection's lost. Max speed 320. So we're not going to do all the ECANs, but there we go. So now we're using the 3rd air data computer. Crucially, we have protections lost. Alternate law protections lost. Likewise, you could just turn off ADR 2 and 3 or whichever combination you fancy. So there we go. So the protections are now lost, and you can see that because we've got these amber crosses here. So it will now, the airplane will happily bank past those. In roll, we're in direct law now, so I'm just controlling the ailerons like a conventional aircraft, and I can roll past those markers. There you go. Totally possible. It's still G protected. The Airbus will still, in pitch control, fly G force. So if I pull back, it will still only go to 2.5 G. But now, if that alpha protection, that yellow bar comes up beneath us as we slow down, so if I pull, you'll see it rise. It will actually not have that. It will be a VLS straight in, or it will have a stall warner basically, which is now the red bar. So that is now an issue for us. We could stall this aircraft, whereas before it would obviously lower the nose on us. I'm just going to wind the altitude window out of the way so we don't get that constantly. Right, let's turn away from the Alps. That's a particularly fun place to be doing this. I thought it would just be quite a spectacular view out the window, but they are quite close down there. And let's get the speed back up, and let's talk about how we prevent this situation. So let's say we've had an issue with the aircraft that's put us into this position. We've lost some of our air data computers or whatever else. We're in alternate law now and no auto thrust, no autopilot. Crucial things we need to do, and this is true all the time, even when things are working well, is monitor the aircraft. We need to know that the aircraft is doing what we want from it. We need to understand the modes we're in and where we need the aircraft as well. So without understanding that, we can't monitor it properly because we don't know what we need it to do. So if we said I want to be at 25,000 feet and I want to be pointing over in the heading 270, then that's what I need to be aware of. I need to monitor it and know what I expect the aircraft to do. This sounds obvious, but of course, lots of things go on the flight deck. We're dealing with passenger issues, air traffic control, dealing with the state of the aircraft. So it's no good getting sucked into this ECAM page, this nice long ECAM. You could be sitting here reading this intently, but then if you're not looking up here, you could miss that we're diverging from where we want to be. And once we're diverging, then we have an issue and we need to correct it. So careful monitoring, understanding what we expect it to do and what sort of things we expect. So I'm expecting to fly level at 25,000 feet, about 280 knots. So if I sit there and I'm monitoring and I see that the engines are back at idle or somewhere here, 50 or 40% N1, then I know that that's probably not going to hold the speed at 280 knots. So I need to do something about that. So all of this stuff is totally crucial to preventing it. We need to detect the deviations when they happen as well. So you've got to be monitoring carefully. I can see the speed is slow. What do I expect? Well, I expect more thrust, so let's get that thrust on. These are the basic principles we apply all the time. Now, I'm sorry to talk so long about it, but this all setup is very important to understanding the main issue, which is the more exciting upset recovery section. So that's how we prevent it. It's called upset prevention recovery. We need to prevent it before we hopefully would ever have to actually recover from it. Right, now let's go to the next bit. Let's say we found ourselves in an upset. There's two typical upset positions to be in, nose high and nose low. The reason we separate them into a nose high and a nose low is because there's a different reaction to each position. So we're going to start off with a nose high. What I mean by that is we find ourselves in an upset position where the nose is pointing up in the sky. For whatever reason, the turbulence or whatever else, there you go, you can hear the stall warner there. So we'll apply nose down and get ourselves out of that. That's just demonstrating. I'm going to not do things entirely properly at certain points in this video because I'm focusing on the upset prevention recovery. So starting with a nose high, first thing we need to do is, as we've discussed, you should have monitored it and detected when it happened. So you'll do that so that you can safely say that you know what's going on. It's very hard to, if you've been distracted by something else, to then come in and suddenly recognize what's going on, but it's important we try. So if you've been looking away or you've been dealing with the cabin or you were looking at the status page and suddenly you look around or you hear something and you realize that the nose is way up in the sky, then you need to recognize that it's a nose high situation. That sounds obvious, but when all these numbers are spinning and changing very quickly and the aircraft is shaking you around, it could be hard. So we have a system to help us recognize it. You're going to communicate with the other pilot that something's wrong straight away. That's the very first thing you do. Upset recovery, or we're in an upset situation, something like that. Then you're going to assess which one you're actually in. How do we do that? Well, you're going to look at the PFD and you're going to work out, is it all blue or is it all brown? Is the nose up in the sky or is it down pointing at the ground? And is it moving? Because it could start high but be rapidly reducing down, 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 or vice versa. Is the speed increasing or is it reducing? I.e., are we gaining energy or are we losing energy? Very different situations to be in. Likewise, is the altitude going up or is it going down? And it could be, in a certain situation, the risk is you interpret one of them the wrong way around. So by looking at all three of these, for example, you might think that the speed is increasing, but actually the altitude is increasing or something like that. Again, unlikely, but these are, unusual situations to be put into. So you're going to recognize that. So what are we expecting with a nose high? Well, lots of blue on the PFD, a high pitch attitude. We're expecting to see the speed reducing, coming back very quickly, and the altitude winding up very quickly as well. If we see those, then we're going to say nose high or something like that. Just communicate with the other pilot. The nose is high. We need to recover. And what are we going to do then? Well, first of all, if we have a stall, that stall warning you heard there saying stall, stall, then we are going to absolutely apply the stall recovery, which is to lower that nose initially. So the actions we've discussed so far are joint. We're going to communicate, we're going to assess whether the energy's what the energy state of the aircraft is and whether we're in a nose high or a nose low. And we're going to recover from the stall if we need to. So we've decided we're in a nose high in the example I'm talking about here. I.e. we've got the blue, we've got the speed reducing, the altitude increasing. So we now go into the recovery for the nose high, which is, first of all, recognize it and say it as discussed. Then you're going to take over from the autopilot and flight director if you need to. The autopilot and the auto thrust. If the autopilot and auto thrust are doing the right thing and it's actually improving the situation, then you might want to leave them alone. But if they are not, or they are struggling, then you need to disconnect them and recover yourself. Now, it's easy to jump to that conclusion, but it's very often that the autopilot and auto thrust will do a great job of getting the aircraft back. But if it's too extreme or the situation needs it, then you take over. Next, we're going to apply the nose down. Same as the stall recovery, get that nose down, reduce the pressure on the wings, reduce the angle of attack, and remove the risk of a stall. So that's very important. So get that nose down. Remember, you could be in a different law, or it might be that the normal Airbus magic, the Airbus auto trims, this trim wheel is running for us. It may be that this has all gone wrong or broken or whatever the reason. So if you need to, you might need to adjust the trim wheel yourself down here. Now, if you do that, that won't necessarily work in all laws, but if you need to do that, it is important that you do it in small amounts. Large trim changes could actually make the situation much worse or uncontrollable as you try to recover. So small trim changes if required, but hopefully you'll just be able to recover with the side stick. So get that nose down. Once the nose is coming down, you can adjust the thrust. So it's likely that the speed will be reducing. So then you're going to apply more thrust to the engines to try and recover that energy, stop the aircraft getting too slow whilst the nose comes down. One thing to note, if you're in an Airbus normally and we change the thrust, look at that, if I take all the thrust off, notice there's no pitch power couple. So by changing the thrust on these engines, which are way down there beneath the centre of gravity, on a 737, if you change the thrust, it changes the nose attitude of the aircraft. It pushes the nose up or down. However, in this situation, on the Airbus, it normally doesn't. But you don't know, maybe it will. And there are limitations, of course, because the Airbus is only preventing the pitch power couple by adjusting the control surfaces. Why am I telling you all this? The point is, if you're applying full thrust whilst trying to lower the nose in an unusual situation, it's possible you'll actually prevent yourself from being able to push the nose down enough. If your elevator doesn't have the authority it needs and you've got full thrust on, the thrust will be keeping the nose in the air. So you adjust the thrust as required, get the maximum thrust you can, whilst also being able to lower the nose. Okay, so to recap so far, we've recognised the situation, we've taken over from the automatics if required, we've lowered the nose, because that's the most important risk here, get that angle of attack down, and now we're adjusting the thrust to try and sort out the energy if required. Next, we're going to adjust the roll not to exceed 60 degrees of bank. If normal pitch control is working okay, then you can actually almost leave the bank where it is. So if you find yourself with a bank of sort of like 30 degrees or something, you can just leave it there and just keep pushing the nose down, because by banking, the lift from the wings, instead of acting straight up, acts off to an angle, so it reduces the lift and it's going to help the nose drop, which is going to help us recover and get the speed back. But if the bank is over 60 degrees, so if you're sitting out here somewhere, then you need to get it within 60, just into a controlled situation, and then you can let the nose fall and gently bring the nose back round. Something to remember is, in a nose high situation, what we don't want to do is stall the aircraft. So you might think, well, why don't you just roll the wings level? But of course, if you're nose high and you're trying to do extreme things, look at that, look what comes up on the wings, the speed brakes. So you're actually increasing the drag on the airframe by moving the control surfaces like that. We've got those roll spoilers coming out. So what you're going to do is that you're going to have the nose high, and then you're going to do that, you're bringing the wings level. You're actually reducing the lift from the aircraft in total and at risk of putting it into a stall. So that's why you can have the option to get the bank under control, but then once it's there, it's okay to leave it at a bit of an angle to let the nose come down. Finally, you're going to recover to level flight. So that means resetting your datums. So have an idea of what you expect the airplane to be doing at this point. So 26,000 feet, level flight, as we saw earlier, 2.5 degrees on the pitch, and something like 70% on the N1 seemed to work out for us. But maybe a bit more, maybe near to 80. But there we go. So put it back somewhere reasonable, and then you can recover through communication and rebuild of the automatics if possible. So that is a nose high. A big topic, I know, but it's all going to happen in a few seconds. So let's take a look at it. Okay, so let's get on with it and put the aircraft into one of these situations. I'm just going to lower the nose a bit and get down to slightly more intermediate altitude. And so I'm going to put the aircraft into some pretty unusual situations. I want to reassure anybody watching this that this almost never, ever, ever happens. It's so incredibly rare. It's not something any pilot expects to see in any point in their career. It is not caused generally by wake turbulence or mountains. These are just things that could potentially, in a ridiculously extreme situation, have this effect. It's just a way for us to be able to deal with and be trained to deal with the most extreme and unlikely situations, just in case they do occur. Hopefully it's reassuring to you to see that the aircraft can handle it, and we are trained to handle it even at its most extreme side of aviation. That's what I'm trying to get across in this video. Okay, so first of all, we're going to go for a nose high situation. Remember, we're going to recognize that with lots of blue on the PFD, reducing airspeed, increasing altitude. Once you've recognized it, we'll take over from the automatics if required, if they're not improving the situation on their own. We're going to put the nose down, we're going to adjust the thrust, we're going to adjust the roll, and then we're going to recover to level flight. It's going to happen so quickly, I'm going to struggle to say it all out loud as we do it. I apologize for that now. It's just this situation needs to be recovered quickly. So watch carefully and you'll see those things happen in order. So this is me now putting the aircraft into an unusual situation. So I'm going to do this myself. So, 28,000 feet, I don't expect to see this while I'm having my scrambled eggs. So I'm going to recognize it. Nose high, speed reducing, altitude increasing. First of all, take over from the automatics, lower the nose, adjust the bank within 60 degrees in order to help it come down. Now the nose is dropping, speed is reducing, so I'm going to make sure we've got climb thrust on. Now we've done that, nose is in a sensible situation. Let's roll the wings to level and recover. And that's it. Back to 2.5 degrees on the pitch, gently, and setting the thrust back to sort of 70% so the speed doesn't run away, or about 80%, 75, something like that. And there we go. We're in level flight again, 280 knots, or 260 knots. Happens very quickly, doesn't it? So we'll do a couple more just to prove the point that this does work. By the way, pilots are trained to do this not by setting it up themselves. Someone will set it up for them, and then they will just have to open their eyes and recover. So even if you're totally startled by it, so this is not something that you would do yourself like I'm doing here. This is just to demonstrate the point. So there we go. That all worked out nicely, didn't it? We're back here in level flight. No big deal. Even from what was a very extreme situation, 20 degrees of bank at almost 30,000 feet is not likely. So let's do another nose high situation just to demonstrate it again. So I'm going to, again, put the aircraft in. We're going to actually put the thrust back a little bit as if it was sort of something was wrong with the thrust. And there we go. So you're having scrambled eggs again, and then you're looking at, oh no. So nose is high, speed reducing, altitude climbing. I'm going to take over, put the nose down as required. Now get the bank within 60 degrees, which it is. We're back to level flight, speed reducing, bringing the thrust up to climb thrust. And now we've got enough energy. I'm going to recover to my datum, 2.5 degrees on the pitch and about 70% on the thrust. Important to note that you don't want to recover anything too dramatically. If you suddenly try and roll the aircraft too quickly at low speed, then you have a risk of putting it into another upset situation or stalling a wing or something like that. So gentle recovery. Don't do anything extreme, especially at low speed. You've got, in some cases, like this one, we have time to do it sensibly. And the point is you can't recover an aircraft from a stall if you do it too extreme, and you're going to lose more altitude that way anyway. Now let's deal with the obvious next step, which is a nose low upset situation. So how do we recognize this? Well, no surprise, it looks very different to the other one. We will have the nose below the horizon, lots of brown on the PFD, speed increasing and an altitude reducing. So same steps as before. You're going to recognize it, communicate it to the person next to you. Tell them what you're going to recover from. I've got a nose low situation here, I'm going to recover. They might say, oh, you haven't actually, you've got it wrong. That's the whole point. So we want to make sure we get it right. Then we're going to take over from the automatics if required, if they aren't already doing a good job of fixing it. You're going to also, of course, recover from the stall if you need to. Remember, you could still have a nose low attitude and be stalling. It's about angle of attack. So you can stall at any attitude, any speed. It's about your angle of attack. So make sure you recover from the stall if required. But next, instead of, at this point in the nose high, you saw that we lowered the nose as our first sort of input on the aircraft. But we're actually going to adjust the roll. The reason for this is we need to roll the aircraft to the nearest horizon, the shortest way to wings level. The reason is, with the nose right down low, we need to eventually pull up and get away from pointing at the ground. Of course, that sounds obvious. If you try and pull up while the aircraft is banked, like this, so there it is, it's banked, and then if I pull back, full back stick on the side stick now, full back stick there, and look, we're not actually even raising the nose, we're just going around in a circle. The reason is the lift from the wings is pointing in this direction over here, across the horizon. You can see it outside. So the wings are drawing lift in that way and dragging us around this turn. So we're not actually getting the nose to rise at all, we're just pointing more and more at the ground. Whereas if I roll the wings to level and then pull, look at that, we go straight up, nose goes up, 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 because of course we're now pulling the aircraft with the lift vector, as it were, the big arrow pointing upwards above the wings, which is where we want it. So roll to the shortest direction to wings level. Something to note that it's a bug I've discovered only while practicing this actually, or showing this in today's video. This little section above this white line actually stays blue on the real Airbus PFD. So it's something you don't notice. You'll see how these angle of attack, or the pitch markers on the PFD, they actually disappear behind it. The reason is this stays blue in all situations, even if the whole PFD is brown. The reason that is so that if I roll, you see we have a horizon there. So even if you've got all brown on the PFD, a bit of blue remains, so you can see how to roll to wings level, in which direction is the shortest way. You don't want to roll the wrong way, or you're going to effectively roll the airplane upside down to get there, which is no good at all. So shortest way to the horizon. Once you've done that, we're going to adjust the thrust situation. Again, you'd think, well, why aren't you pulling up? Well, remember, these things happen very quickly, but we need to adjust the thrust, because if the speed is increasing and running away and we have toga thrust or something crazy on, then even if we pull up, we're increasing the distance it's going to take us to do that and the time, and by which point it might be too late. So sort out the thrust, and then you can bring the pitch to the correct place, so start pulling back on the side stick. So let's take a look at that. So we're cruising along. Let me just get the speed back actually first. I'm just going to use the speed brake. And once again, something major happens, whatever it is that puts the aircraft into this utterly ridiculous situation. Let's put the speed brakes in now. So you had sort of the thrust was sitting at something like 60%. Here you go. And then you look over on the PFD after you've been dealing with a broken airplane and all sorts of horrible things, and you see something awful like that. So we need to recognize it. So what have we got? Well, I've got lots of brown, altitude decreasing, speed increasing, so I've got a nose low situation. So first of all, I'm going to roll the wings to wings level. I'm going to idle the thrust and put the speed brakes out because we're increasing in speed, and now I'm going to pull up to that horizon and keep pulling and keep pulling. Now we've gone through by quite a margin. We are G protected. You'll see the G load should still apply in this situation. There we go. Back to datum, 2.5 degrees of pitch. Thrust is at idle with the speed brakes out, but the speed is reducing. Let's bring the speed brake back in. Good. And now I'm going to start. There we go. Bringing the thrust back up to something sensible. And we've recovered. Pretty extreme. I know I'm a bit slow in the recovery there during the video to show you each step, as it were. But yeah, there you go. You can recover the situation. So let's do that once more. I'll start from a slightly slower speed to give it a more realistic sort of time frame, but it's all being broken down into steps and recognizing where you're starting from and doing those actions in order. But crucially, you roll the wings before you and then you roll the wings and adjust the thrust before you raise the nose, compared to the nose high where we immediately lower the nose, and that's why we have to recognize whether it's nose low or nose high. Let's get the energy right back on the airplane before we start the next one. You'll notice that in the Phoenix, this blue bit here, which should stay blue, actually turns brown, and that's a bit of a bug, like I say, only just discovered today while doing this video. So you'll be in this sort of situation, maybe a bit lower, and then it should stay blue above that white line. But there we go. Right, so I've got a nose low situation, lots of brown, altitude reducing, speed increasing. I'm going to roll the wings to the nearest horizon, which I can see at the top of the PFD. I'm going to bring the speed back, put the speed brakes out, and I'm going to pull up on the side stick to get the nose up. You'll see how quickly the rates of descent can get ridiculous. But there we go, pulling the side stick, pulling through. Okay, nose is in a normal situation now for level flight, which I'm happy to be in, but the speed's reducing, so let's get rid of the speed brakes and let's get the thrust back to something sensible. Very important you reset those datums, otherwise, before you know it, you've used some quite extreme controls to recover. So if you're suddenly sat there, maybe you're quite high and you've got speed brakes out, you need to get rid of them quickly to put the aircraft, or at a reasonable pace, to put the aircraft back into a stable situation. But here we are, back, 2.5 degrees pitch, 300 knots, level flight, stable, back where we want to be. Now you might be thinking, well, that's all very well and good, 320 sim pilot, but you've got a nice big picture out the window, mountains for view. You won't just be a lot harder IMC. Well, I'm just going to say, and IMC means instrument meteorological conditions. This is trained, of course, where you can't see anything. So we are trained to deal with this in this situation, just using the PFD and the references. So let's do another nose high situation. So again, you're in the clouds this time, having your scrambled eggs. You look over, you see this. Right, nose high, I'm going to push forward on the side stick. I'm going to bring the wings within 60 degrees of bank, let the nose drop, adding thrust now. Okay, we're back to sensible position, rolling the wings to level, 2.5 degrees on the pitch, 80% on the thrust. Oh, a bit much on the pitch there, and level flight. So the principle works exactly the same, and it's designed to work entirely in instrument meteorological conditions, which is when you can't see, you're flying by the instruments. Likewise with the nose low, we can just put the nose down, so again you've got distracted, and you look over and you go, upset position, okay, nose low, lots of brown, speed increasing, altitude reducing. I'm going to roll the wings to the horizon, idle the thrust, speed brakes out, pull the nose up to recover to level flight. So that's all for today's video. Thank you very much for watching. I hope it's been interesting for you. Again, hopefully reassuring as well. This is an incredibly extreme situation we train for because we need to be prepared for it. But like I say, incredibly unlikely to happen. There'll be plenty more content like this on the channel, so do please subscribe if you'd like to see more. There's our Discord available to chat about flight simulation and also get the updates on the latest videos and upcoming live streams. Of course, I'll be streaming more Airbus flights and other airliners on Flight Simulator and X Plane 12 and other simulators in the near future. So again, do please subscribe if you'd like to see more of those. That's all then. Thank you again for watching. Keep safe and well. Bye bye.